Neighbors in fear of drinking their tap water.
They poison our water, I feel like they're poisoning our bodies, my children.
But state regulators say the water is safe to drink. We're asking tough questions in an On Your Side investigation. Your News at 6 starts right now.
This broadcast is sponsored by Subaru South Boulevard and Subaru Concord. WBTV, On Your Side. WBTV News starts right now.
We are on your side tonight investigating residents' fears about potentially toxic tap water. Nice to have you here at 6. I'm Maureen O'Boyle.
And I'm Paul Cameron. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. More than 200 families who live near Duke coal-powered plants in Salisbury and Belmont are afraid to drink water from their taps. They were told the water in their wells was toxic. We first told you about that a year ago. But last month, state regulators reversed that decision, insisting the water is safe. Now we're pushing state regulators to explain why they changed that ruling. Some community members tell investigative reporter Nick Oxner the decision could be putting their lives in danger.
Yeah, Paul, last year when residents were told to stop drinking their water, the state's toxicologist said the move was out of an abundance of caution. Tests revealed elevated levels of a chemical called hexavalent chromium, the same toxic substance featured in the movie Erin Brockovich. But last month, regulators reversed themselves and said the elevated levels are below the EPA standards and don't pose an increased health risk. The water coming out of Marcos Alboron's well in Salisbury hasn't been good for much this past year, ever since state regulators told him it contained elevated levels of hexavalent chromium.
I was shocked, because I thought the water well was safe, and I thought that was the safest water to drink.
State tests revealed his water had more than 21 parts per billion hexavalent chromium. At the time, regulators said anything more than 0.07 was too much.
I was scared for my children.
Alboron and his family of 4 children moved into their house in 2010. He says after he moved, he had persistent rashes across his body. His children were frequently sick with stomach issues. Symptoms, Alboron says, all but vanished when his family started drinking only bottled water supplied by Duke Power.
A month later, the rashes went away. My kids don't get sick as much anymore.
But last month, regulators at the State Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Environmental Quality sent a new letter telling Alboron he could drink his water. Is his water safe to drink?
Yes, it complies with the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act.
Tom Reeder is Assistant Secretary for the Environment at DEQ. He, along with Dr. Randall Williams at DHHS, have defended the letters by pointing to the fact there's currently no federal standard limiting how much hexavalent chromium should be in the water.
We really didn't feel like the health risk warranted the do not drink recommendations, specifically when you looked at their presence in other water supplies.
The pair said the levels of hexavalent chromium in the wells near Duke coal plants is comparable to what's found in public water systems. You all have said that the level in these wells is the same as the level in the public drinking water. Can we agree that that's just not a true statement?
No, I would never agree to that. I mean, what public drinking water are you talking about?
Data published by the Environmental Protection Agency suggests the claims made by Reeder and Williams are wrong. Nearly 150 water systems in North Carolina began testing their water for hexavalent chromium in 2014 as part of a new voluntary EPA program. The average level of hexavalent chromium in those water systems over 1 year of the voluntary testing was 0.15, more than 100 times less than the levels at Alboron's well. How many drinking water systems across the state have hexavalent chromium at that level?
I thought the question was whether the water was safe to drink. The water is safe to drink. It complies with the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act.
But the question I'm asking now, you have said, both of you have said in some form publicly that the level of hexavalent chromium in the wells that we're talking about is at the same levels.
And most of them are.
He's also saying that our water is as safe as city water. And I don't believe that. How could that be possible?
Back in Salisbury, Marcos Alboron says neither his kids nor even his animals will go back to drinking the water from the well.
How does he expect me to give this water to my children and poison them? That's wrong.
Now, there are 2 different types of chromium, hexavalent chromium and chromium-3. Currently, the EPA's limits only address the total amounts of both elements in the drinking water combined. That's expected to change later this year when federal regulators issue new guidelines specific for hexavalent chromium. Paul?
Nick, with this new ruling that the water is safe, what do the environmental groups think about this?
Yeah, well, some groups here locally, like the Catawba River Keeper, say the regulators are relying on science that's really imprecise. Coming up tonight at 11 o'clock, Paul, hear more from those environmental activists like the Catawba River Keeper and the state health director defend himself.
Interesting statistics, Nick. Thank you.
Residents who live near coal-powered steam plants in Belmont and Salisbury have been given the okay to drink their tap water again. But some local environmental watchdogs say that's a mistake. They tell investigative reporter Nick Oxner the state's decision could put people's lives in danger.
A year ago, residents near the Allen and Buck steam stations in Belmont and Salisbury were told their well water was toxic. Duke Power started trucking them pallets of bottled water. But last month, state regulators reversed that decision and said the water was safe.
Basically left with a situation now where we have probably 240 well owners who are held to a standard that no one else really in the country is held to.
The state's health director, Dr. Randall Williams, said the do not drink orders were issued out of abundance of caution and used a strict standard for determining what level of a chemical called hexavalent chromium was safe.
We really didn't feel like the health risk warranted the do not drink recommendations, specifically when you looked at their presence in other water supplies.
Should people be drinking that water?
I would not drink that water. We've had state officials say that they would not drink that water. So, no, they should not be drinking that water.
Sam Perkins is the Catawba River Keeper. He says state regulators' assertion that the well water is just as safe as public drinking water just isn't true.
The two aren't comparable. Put it in March Madness terms, it would be like saying a score of 70-7 is a close game or tie.
Williams, the state health director, says the water is safe because it meets EPA standards, which Perkins says are outdated and due to be replaced later this year.
The state is changing what the standard is.
Reporting in Raleigh, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
We have much more on our investigation into the state's decision to lift the do not drink order on our website. It is on the front page right now, WBTV.com.
At 6, the fight continues in North Carolina over what to do with millions of tons of coal ash currently buried in the ground around the Duke power plants. Yesterday, lawmakers in the North Carolina House passed a new bill re-establishing the Coal Ash Management Commission. Today, that bill was rejected by the state Senate. Our investigative reporter Nick Oxner visited a coal ash basin today to get a closer look at the problem at the center of the debate.
Spend a day at the Marshall Steam Station coal ash basin and you'll feel like you're lost in a far-off nature preserve. Osprey and heron nest in the wetlands, a breeze rustles the grass. But under the trees, grass, and calm water is millions of tons of coal ash. When lawmakers talk about excavating coal ash basins, this is what they want to dig up.
The estimate is around 800,000 trucks in order to excavate the basin and haul all of that material off-site to some remote landfill.
Up here atop a coal ash landfill at the Marshall Steam Station, you get a good perspective of just how big their coal ash basin is. It totals more than 400 acres, and Duke Power says it would take decades, not years, to dig it all out.
It would be a combination of consolidating, mounding, and capping and closing.
Brian Weisker is Vice President of Coal Combustion Products Operations and Maintenance for Duke Power. He and the company would rather cap the coal ash basin instead of digging it up.
You'd put a synthetic cap and then a soil cap on top of it, and then you'd seed it.
But environmental advocates say capping coal ash basins would still leave groundwater susceptible to contamination from coal ash buried below the water table. Would you do anything to address the flow of groundwater below the water table of the coal ash that's sitting there?
There would be some options that you could engineer to do. There's different things. I mean, we get really technical as what you could do.
Reporting at the Marshall Steam Station in Catawba County, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Happening right now in Raleigh, lawmakers debating a bill on what to do with the state's coal ash ponds. The state House of Representatives is set to vote on a bill that will require Duke Energy to provide clean drinking water to residents who live near coal ash ponds.
Tonight, On Your Side investigation is unearthing some new information that shows the legislation pushed through this week may leave some people without help. Our investigative reporter, Nick Oxner, has spent months investigating toxic coal ash and the toll it's taking on drinking water across the state. Nick is live in Raleigh tonight, so Nick, tell us, what have you uncovered?
Yeah, Paul, residents near the Cliffside Steam Station in the western part of Cleveland County called us months ago with concerns that the same toxin that's associated with coal ash could be in their water. Neither the state nor Duke Energy had tested their water, so we did. And what we found had many neighbors demanding help.
That's where it's coming.
In a far-off corner of Cleveland County sits a group of neighbors who've been fighting for years to be heard.
This section down here is called the forgotten part of Cleveland County.
Roger Hollis, his wife, and his horse live just a couple miles from the Cliffside Steam Station, a landmark whose towering stacks have served as both a source of power and jobs since the 1940s. These days, it's seen as more of a hazard than a help.
You can see these people here. These are friends and neighbors of this loop. Everybody would like to have fresh water. I think we're entitled to it.
Hollis and his neighbors want clean water. They called On Your Side investigates amid ongoing speculation that Duke coal ash ponds are contaminating water wells across the state. Last year, residents with houses closest to the coal ash ponds got a letter from state regulators telling them not to drink their water because it contained elevated levels of a toxic chemical known as hexavalent chromium. But folks like Roger Hollis and his neighbors live too far away. Some by just a few hundred feet for their wells to be tested. What does it say to you that some of your neighbors have been told not to drink their water,
right,
but others who live right down the street weren't tested because they were just outside of the 1,500-foot buffer?
It's an excuse for Duke Power not to be committed to anything.
We decided to test the water ourselves. We collected samples and contracted with the same lab that ran the test for the state. Of the 6 wells we tested, only 2 had levels below the threshold set by DHHS when it issued its do not drink letters in 2015. And both of those were farther away from the ash pond, including this well that was more than 1.5 miles from the basin. But as we looked at wells closer to the basin, the levels began to rise, including this well that had elevated levels more than 4 times that threshold used in 2015. That was more than 3/4 mile away from the ash basin. And this well that had levels 9 times that of the threshold in 2015, that was less than 1/2 mile away from the coal ash pond.
We know what the problem is. The wells are contaminated. We know where it's coming from. Duke Power. And we do know how to cure it.
You're saying that these coal ash basins have no impact on the water wells of the people who live near the coal ash basin?
Yes, that's correct.
Erin Colbert is a spokeswoman for Duke Energy. She says our test, which found elevated levels of the same toxic chemical common in coal ash, has nothing to do with the ash ponds just down the road.
I can say for certainty the ash basins around the state are not affecting people's wells. The groundwater direction that's flowing near the ash basin is not heading toward neighbors' wells nearby.
Colbert showed us this map, which shows the groundwater seeped with coal ash contaminants flowing only under Duke's property. But an expert hydrogeologist hired by the Southern Environmental Law Center recently submitted a report to the state regulators saying Duke's model is wrong. The report explains that experts hired by Duke used a model to predict groundwater flow that used incorrect data and effectively drew an underground wall around the coal ash pond. Environmentalists are quick to point out that other studies say that there is groundwater flowing towards those wells.
Yeah, I'm not convinced by that at all.
They are showing elevated levels of vanadium and hexavalent chromium. Is that not showing? Those are the chemicals that are in coal ash.
Those are chemicals that are naturally occurring in the soil and that are also in coal ash.
There are lots of people who would disagree with you on that.
Sure, but that's not why you're here to interview me.
These days, the only coal dust around the Cliffside plant comes from trucks hauling ash to a lined landfill, not from the old stacks. A sign of change for the better, these neighbors say. Change they want to see happen to their water, too. Duke says its scientists have proven that their coal ash basins doesn't contaminate the water in your well. Do you believe that?
No. I don't believe, and I'm not trying to be funny, I don't believe anything that comes from Duke Power. Anything.
And again, that debate underway right now in the House of Representatives, in the chamber just behind me, on legislation that would require Duke to provide alternative water sources to residents within 1/2 mile of coal ash facilities, and gives DEQ the ability to mandate Duke provide water to people outside of that radius. What criteria they use, whether or not they'll do any testing like we did for this investigation, remains to be seen. For now, reporting live at the legislature in Raleigh, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Environmental regulators on the scene tonight, trying to figure out what caused water tainted with a potentially toxic chemical to leak into Lake Wylie. Welcome to WBTV News at 6. I'm Paul Cameron.
And I'm Maureen O'Boyle. It's good to have you here. The investigation comes after the Catawba Riverkeeper found water leaking from a pipe connected to a Duke Energy coal ash basin. This is a look from Sky 3 of the area. Investigative reporter Nick Ochsner first broke news of this investigation on WBTV.com this afternoon. Nick joins us now. So Nick, why does the Riverkeeper say this discovery is so concerning?
Well, Maureen, the Riverkeeper tells me he's not as concerned by the leak itself, but really by the fact a 60-year-old metal pipe connected to a coal ash basin went undetected and he says unmonitored for years until the discovery last week. The Catawba Riverkeeper shot cell phone video of water leaking out of this old metal pipe during a visit to a Duke Energy coal ash basin at the Allen Steam Station in Belmont last week. Duke Energy says the pipe was installed sometime in the 1950s and helped drain water from a coal ash pond. It was taken out of service in the 60s and had been left off permits and drawings documenting Duke's coal ash basins ever since.
What we were most concerned about is that this was a corrugated metal pipe that took us 20 minutes to find, but the Duke personnel did not know what it was. They didn't have a record of it.
Sam Perkins is the Catawba Riverkeeper. He found the pipe during a site visit of the Allen Steam Station coal ash facilities and says the conditions surrounding the newly discovered pipe are very similar to what led to the massive coal ash spill along the Dan River in 2014.
There is a corrugated metal pipe, same material at Dan River, going under an ash basin, like at Dan River, with very corrosive conditions created by that ash.
A Duke spokeswoman tells On Your Side investigates the volume of water coming from the pipe amounted to roughly a coffee cup full every minute. The company says the pipe was last inspected this fall as part of a larger inspection of its coal ash facility. They say no leak was found. But Perkins wonders why then was the pipe not included on any of the company's disclosure documents until he noticed the leak last week.
This is a pipe that should have been noted, and if there were any diligence, addressed and inspected.
Do you think you'll find more pipes like this?
I think we will continue to find previously undocumented problems.
Now, the Duke spokeswoman tells me workers were on site today working to cap that pipe, essentially taking steps to make sure nothing else can come in that pipe or, more importantly, flow out. Guys, back to you.
And Nick, as you mentioned, this isn't the first time we've seen problems with coal ash in our area. You will remember the spill at Dan River. Tens of thousands of pounds of coal ash dumped in Eden. Duke Energy later paid a $6 million settlement. After that, communities near coal ash ponds complained cancerous materials were seeping into their wells. They were forced to use only bottled water for almost 2 years, leading to passionate arguments.